Hello everybody, this is going to be the first in a small number of videos designed to cover the theory of price elasticity of demand. Now first things first, what you can now see on your screen is the specification that we've been working on in class quite recently. Now what we've been looking at is 1.2.1 and 1.2.2. So we've been looking here what we mean by rational decision making, but also what we mean by the theory of demand. This video is going to start to explore the workings of 1.2.3. We're going to be looking at something that we call price elasticity of demand. So this video is going to take you through the basic, the introductory theory for price elasticity of demand. Right, now anyway, before you start exploring this new topic, it's important that you consolidate your understanding of what we've done so far linked to demand. So question 1 on the board, everyone, now will show you some questions that I want to put down the answers to. Can you please jot down these questions and jot down your answers? When you feel like you're comfortable with this theory, hit play and we'll start exploring price elasticity of demand. Right, anyway, now let's think then about what elasticity actually is. Now, what we are doing in economics, we are building up economic models. And for these models to work, we have to assume ceteris paribus. We're building the assumption of ceteris paribus. Now, what we're going to be looking at now is how responsive demand is to the change in one other variable. So we hold all other variables constant. So, for example, with price elasticity of demand, we're going to be looking at how responsive is demand to a change in price. So will demand change significantly if prices change, or will demand not change significantly if price levels change? Now, it's worth noting that there are two other forms of elasticity as well, income and cross elasticity of demand. We'll have later videos in this series which will explore those two concepts as well. But this is all about price elasticity of demand. Right, now at the bottom of the page here, I've included a formula which is really, really important that you understand and you're able to use to do well with this topic on elasticity. So to work out a percentage change, the formula that you would use would be new value divided by original value. Whatever you then get from that number, you will then divide by the original value. And whatever you get from that, you would then multiply by 100. And what you've got at the bottom of the page there is a numerical example talking you through this. So this is the starts of thinking about price elasticity of demand. So what you've got is a scenario where somebody is buying 8 units of a good or a service and the price is £2. When the price falls to £1.20, we're going to get an extension of demand. So people now buy 13 of this product. So look at the calculation to work out the percentage changes. So demand, well, the new demand is 13. The original demand was 8. So if we do 13 take away 8, and then we divide that by 8, and then we multiply it by 100, we're going to get a 62.5% increase in demand. We can see from the price calculation that price has fallen by 40%. So what we can see is that price has fallen by 40%, and that leads to demand increasing by 62.5%. Now, it might be for some other products that demand will be less responsive to a change in price. So we might find with some products, if prices fell by 40%, demand might only increase by 5% or 10%. This topic is exploring this very idea. How responsive is demand to a change in price? Right, now you've got here the definition and the formula to work out price elasticity of demand. So what we should all now be happy with is that price elasticity of demand is measuring the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. So if you increase or lower price, what impact will that have on demand? The formula to work this out is calculated by the percentage change in demand divided by the percentage change in price. Now, it's worth noting, everyone, that when you use this formula, you should always get a negative number. And that is because with the vast majority of products, there is a negative relationship between price and demand. So what we'd expect if prices go up, demand would go down. Or if price was to go down, demand will go up. So we've got a negative relationship between the two. So from the formula, we should only really get negative values. Right, now there are 5 different possibilities from this formula. We could have what we call, first of all, a perfectly priced inelastic demand. Now, what this would mean is that demand is completely unresponsive to a change in price. So, for example, if we were to increase price by 50%, it might not affect demand in the slightest. So from the formula, that would be 0% change in demand divided by a 50% change in price. Well, that's a score of 0. Now, this is very, very unlikely, but we could argue that in theory, there are some products where any change in price would not affect demand at all. Demand is completely unresponsive to a change in price. Now, the next one is something that we call a price inelastic demand. Now, what this would mean is that the change in price as a percent would exceed the percentage change in demand. So we're going to say here that demand is unresponsive to a change in price. So, for example, if price was to grow by 20%, demand might fall by 10%. So minus 10% divided by 20% would give you a score of minus 0.5. Okay, now because the percent change in demand will be less than the percent change in price, the only values from the formula which would show price inelastic demand would be 0 to minus 1. So 0 to minus 1 from the formula would show a price inelastic demand. Right, now the next one is what we call a price unitary demand. Now, from the formula, we would work this out by a minus 1 score. Now, what we're going to see here is the percentage change in demand will be exactly equal to the percentage change in price. So, for example, if price went down by 20% and demand went up by 20%, it would be 20 divided by minus 20, which would give the score of minus 1. So, in other words, these two things are now changing in proportion to each other. Now, the next was what we call a price elastic demand. Demand is now starting to become responsive to a change in price. So, for example, now we might see if prices grow by 10%, demand might fall by 50%. But if you put that into the formula, minus 50% following that 10% increase in price, that would be minus 5. Right, guys, now what this will therefore mean is now that the percentage change in demand is the percentage change in price. So from the formula now, anything from minus 1 to minus infinity would show price elastic demand. The next one is perfectly price elastic demand. Now, what we're going to have here is an infinite value from the formula. Now, this is almost impossible and not really likely to happen. But the argument would be that if we were to reduce price by just the smallest amount, let's say 1%, there'd be an infinite increase in demand. Or if we were to raise price by a very, very small percent, demand would completely disappear from the market. So infinite. Demand is completely responsive to changes in price. Now, everyone, what I would say is the middle three are the most likely scenarios: price inelastic demand, unitary demand, and price elastic demand. Right. We can show these scenarios in diagrams as well. So again, we've got these 5 different scenarios ranging from perfectly price inelastic demand all the way to perfectly price elastic demand. Now, when you look at the first one, perfectly price inelastic demand, what we're showing here that any increase in price will have no impact on demand whatsoever. Demand is completely unresponsive to changes in demand. The next one, price inelastic demand, we've got a very steep demand curve. Here, what we can see is if price was to grow, there would be a small fall in demand. Or if prices were to fall, there'd be a very small increase in demand. So demand is responsive to changes in price. The next one, price unitary demand. If prices were to grow by 20%, demand would fall by 20%. The next one, price elastic demand. Here, demand is responsive to a change in price. So, for example, now if prices fell by 10%, demand will increase by more than that 10%. And then finally, perfectly price elastic demand, we have a horizontal demand curve. demand is now completely responsive to changes in price. Now, as a reminder, everyone, the middle three are the most likely scenarios: price inelastic demand, unitary demand, and price elastic demand. Now, what we're going to do in the next video is start to explore different examples of these and thinking about the calculations behind them as well. But what I would like to do to end this video, please, is to think about this question. So again, hit pause, jot down your answers for these questions, and when you're happy, end this video and move on to the next video, please. Okay, so you've got there the basic introductory theory to price elasticity of demand.